Welcome to Strong Legends, daily sci-fi stories that fuel your mind. Subscribe and join the legend.
The cosmos was an ocean of black glass, punctuated by pinpricks of light. For the Calorian Alliance, its edges had long been mapped and catalogued, every world charted, every star catalog number filed. Yet at the very boundary of their empire lay a region of eerie emptiness, the Sol sector. No planets, no asteroid belts, not even the faint dust clouds that marked so many other systems. Only void. Captain Ylira's cruiser Auriga glided into position at the fringe of the Sol exclusion zone, its hull gleaming silver under distant starlight. She stood on the bridge's observation deck, her lithe form framed by panoramic viewports. The hum of the ship's systems was a comforting lullaby, but her mind buzzed with tension. This mission wasn't in any official logs. It was a hush-hush operation ordered directly by High Command. They had detected something minimal, almost imperceptible, and utterly inexplicable. "Bridge, report," she called, though her voice barely rose above a whisper. Lieutenant Vareth's fingers danced over his console. Long-range scans confirm no stellar bodies within a 10-light-minute radius, but I'm picking up an intermittent warp field fluctuation. Very low intensity, and only in prime-numbered intervals. He frowned, as if the numbers themselves troubled him. Prime-numbered intervals? Ylira echoed, her interest piqued. On the order of 2, 3, 5, 7 seconds? Precisely, Captain. And there's a faint echo of biosignature readings, carbon-based but at a level so minuscule it's barely discernible. The bridge murmured at the implication. Carbon-based life was common in remote survey reports, but this suggested artifice, a signal perhaps, an intelligent transmission. Lengthen the scan dwell time and isolate the source, Ylira ordered, moving to her command chair, and cross-reference with Deep Space Archives for any sighting of Children of Terra. Her officers exchanged glances. The encoded legend of the Children of Terra was old gossip in academy lecture halls. Stories of an ancient race so advanced they left no trace behind. Over centuries, skeptics dismissed them as myth, a bedtime fairy tale for spacefarers. Yet here they were, chasing whispers at the Empire's edge. As the Auriga drifted deeper into uncharted space, Ylira recalled the last time someone claimed evidence. A trading ship's log, smudged and corrupted, spoke of a planet lush with oceans, then lost without a trace. The idea had been laughable, but if the Children of Terra were real... A soft chime interrupted her reverie. "Captain," Vareth said, holding up a hollow projector. He flicked his wrist. A three-dimensional star chart sprang to life, centered on an uncharted blue-green orb. Coordinates match the signal's origin. Planetary scans show an atmosphere, liquid water, signs of vegetation. The bridge erupted. Technicians shouted to reassign power, recalibrate sensors, and prepare planetary approach protocols. Ylira raised a hand, and silence fell. "Maintain our current distance," she said evenly. "We don't know what we're dealing with. I want a full analysis of atmospheric composition, magnetic field strength, and any artificial structures before we descend." Below decks, in engineering, the ship's reactors rerouted auxiliary power to the long-range sensors. The warp pylons hummed with renewed energy, and through the observation windows the distant planet's swirling clouds grew more distinct, emerald continents draped in ivory clouds, twin moons reflected in its oceans. Back on the bridge, Chief 4, Science Officer Sama leaned close to Vareth's console. "Life signs are scattered but consistent," she reported. "Average metabolic rates correspond to a temperate biosphere. I'm also detecting faint electromagnetic patterns, rhythmic, almost like a pulse." "The same as the warp fluctuation intervals?" Vareth asked. Sama nodded. "Exactly. Whoever, or whatever, is emitting this is synchronizing biosignals with warp field bursts." Ylira stood, her silhouette backlit by the planet. "They're guiding us here." A hush descended. The notion that a civilization had lured the Solarians into unknown territory sent a thrill and a chill through every officer present. They were explorers, diplomats, guardians of the galaxy's knowledge, but potential contact with a lost race blunted all fear. Distance to planet, 5 light minutes, Ylira announced. Prepare a drone swarm for atmospheric entry, and patch a direct channel to High Command. We're not under attack, but we might be walking into the greatest discovery in Silurian history. Below in the drone bay, maintenance teams secured hundreds of sleek, spider-like probes. Each carried scanners, samplers, and translation matrices. When they released them, the probe's blue tracer lines formed a web of data streaming back to the Auriga. Moments later, Ylira watched on her holodisplay as the probes skimmed through cloud layers, revealing continent-spanning forests, jagged mountain ranges, and sprawling cities with spires of iridescent metal. But it was the cities that froze her breath. They had a distinctly terrestrial architecture, domes and towers reminiscent of pre-industrial Earth designs, interspersed with megastructures beyond Colorian engineering. A voice crackled through the comm channel, tinged with static but unmistakably alive. Colorian Alliance vessel Auriga, you are authorized to proceed to orbital rendezvous point Echo 4. Welcome to Sol Prime. The message ended. No signature, no timestamp, no indication of celestial coordinates beyond the rendezvous point. Yet its warmth was unmistakable, and its implications staggering. Captain Ylira exhaled slowly. Plot a course for Echo 4, she said, voice steady but heavy with wonder. Engage at sublight. Bring us honorably into this meeting. As the stars shimmered past the viewport and the Auriga set course, Ylira realized that the abyss of space was no longer empty. It had secrets, stories, and now, legends waiting to be told. And for the first time, the children of Terra were proving that myths could be more real than any star on the Colorian maps. Captain Ylira tapped the comm console, her voice calm but urgent. Lieutenant Vareth, status on the transmission analysis? Still isolating the uplink, Captain, he replied, eyes locked on his holodisplay. A spooling array of waveforms, pulsed in green and gold. The emission pattern is deceptively simple. Prime number intervals of warp field bursts, yet it carries layered subcarriers across multiple frequencies. We've decoded the base rhythm as an invitation of sorts. On the forward viewport, Sol Prime's cobalt oceans and emerald continents spun lazily in orbit. Below, the planet cities glimmered like jewels, their spires catching the dim light of distant stars. Play back the recording, Ylira ordered. A soft trill of piano notes spilled into the silent bridge. The melody was hauntingly familiar, an Earth composition from centuries past, interspersed with bursts of orchestral strings. Beneath the music, a human voice spoke in clipped, precise syllables. Colorian Alliance, this is the United Earth Federation. We recognize your arrival. You are welcome at orbital point Echo 4. Approach unarmed for peaceful dialogue. Coordinates follow. As the voice faded, a sequence of numerals scrolled across the holoscreen. A series of three-dimensional vectors marking a point 20,000 kilometers above the planet's twilight zone. That language. It's Proto-Terran circa 22nd century, Science Officer Sama whispered. We have only fragments in our archives, but the phonetics align perfectly. Ylira exhaled. On one hand, we're being guided by classical music and ancient speech patterns. On the other, they demand we disarm. Trust is generous. Shall I prepare an unarmed shuttle, Captain? Vareth asked, eyebrows raised. She hesitated. The Colorian protocol for first contact was strict. Maintain defensive readiness until the other party proved peaceful. Yet this message bore unmistakable hallmarks of Terran culture, enough to suggest sincerity. Stand down the fighter wings, Ylira decided. Switch shields to passive mode. Power down all weapon arrays once we're within 5 light minutes of Echo 4. I want our shuttle prepped for immediate departure. Aye, Captain. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers rerouted power and encrypted the human message for archive. 2 hours later, the Auriga coasted into position at the holographic marker of Echo 4. The planet's terminator line, where day surrendered to night, ran beneath them like a silver seam. Below, A trio of slender platforms jutted from the upper atmosphere, anchored by invisible magnetic fields. They glowed with soft white lights. Ylira's unarmed shuttle, the Daedalus, slid free from the Auriga's docking bay. She stood at its prow, flanked by Sama and Vareth, while two Calorian security officers monitored the door with unease. As the Daedalus drew near, tractor beams from the platforms engaged, gently guiding it toward a landing cradle. Automated, arms folded around its sides, stabilizing the craft against turbulent air currents. Then the speakers sprung to life, and that same resonant voice filled their helmets, this time softened by atmospheric wind. "Welcome, Captain Ylira of the Calorian Alliance. You're now descending to Platform Alpha. Disembark with your core team and proceed to Conference Suite 3. No weapons will be tolerated." A panel slid open and a ramp lowered. Ylira exchanged a glance with her officers before stepping out into a corridor, bathed in pale, diffused light. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral, uncannily like oak and jasmine combined. They followed silent corridors whose walls bore friezes of Terran history, star charts of the Milky Way, annotated in English and Silurian, portraits of human explorers, and timelines tracing humanity's exodus from Earth through centuries of wandering. At the end of the hall, two figures approached. One was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in a white uniform trimmed with bronze insignia. His hair was silvered at the temples, but his posture was unbowed. At his side stood a smaller figure, a human child, perhaps 7 or 8, clutching a datapad and wearing a simple jumpsuit. "Captain Ylira," the elder man intoned, extending a hand. "I am Admiral Marcus Hale of the United Earth Federation, and this is my granddaughter, Lynn." Ylira inclined her head, mindful of Calorian etiquette. "Admiral, it's an honor." She hesitated over the child, her presence was unexpected. "And, young Lynn?" The girl beamed. "Welcome to home," she said, her accent charmingly unaccented. "I'm the one who sent the music. You liked Beethoven?" Ylira smiled despite herself. "We did. It's evocative." Admiral Hale's stern face softened. "It was her idea. We wanted a greeting that spoke our past and present, to show that we remember Earth, but we've grown beyond it." Sama stepped forward, handing Hale a data crystal. "Preliminary scans indicate your platforms use a hybrid magnetic plasma levitation system. We'd love to study it up close, with your permission." Hale nodded. "By all means, though we ask you share your warp drive data in return. Our Federation has lost much since the fall. We need to rebuild faster than myths allow." Vareth cleared his throat. "Then we have much to discuss. Conference Suite 3? Right this way." Hale led them down another corridor, the walls now decorated with interactive holomaps of human colony worlds. Ylira's heart pounded. This was no trick. It was not an ambush. It was the first true contact between two civilizations who believed the other extinct, or invented. As the doors slid shut behind them, sealing them in a luminous chamber far above an alien world, Ylira realized the full weight of what lay ahead. The signal had been their invitation, but the journey was only beginning. And in the silent gallery of humanity's history, the Calorians were no longer mere spectators. They were about to become participants in a story older than any star. The Calorian Alliance fleet gathered at the outer perimeter of Sol System's second Lagrange point, like a web of silver sentinels. Battlecruisers, destroyers, and corvettes, each hull emblazoned with the Alliance's emblem, drifted in formation under Captain Ylira's watchful eyes. Behind her, the Auriga hummed with restrained power, shield generators humming, weapon arrays locked and primed. "Lieutenant Vareth," Ylira said, voice low over the comnet. "Have we visual confirmation on the fleet at the coordinates?" "Visuals. Coming in now, Captain." Vareth's holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a cluster of points far beyond the expected rendezvous platforms. "My gods. It's—" A collective gasp filled the bridge as the holomap zoomed out. Hundreds of massive vessels glowed against the starfield, their silhouettes cutting arcs of darkness through the light. Each ship was a marvel of ancient and seemingly forgotten engineering, curving hulls of polished duranium, broad warp, Pylons like skeletal wings and towering superstructures that dwarfed Calorian capital ships by at least a factor of 10. By the ancestors, whispered Admiral Corrin, commander of the assembled fleet. His antennae quivered in shock. Is that possible? Ylira held her breath. Open a wideband channel. I want identification and intentions. The comm console flickered, then a deep, resonant voice filled the bridge. Calorian Alliance, this is Admiral Marcus Hale of the United Earth Federation. We apologize for the lateness of our formal greeting. These are the Vanguard-class dreadnoughts of Fleet Terra, our descendants' pride and legacy. We await your response. Silence stretched across the bridge. The word dreadnought evoked raw power, ships whose mere presence could obliterate worlds. Yet here they were, offering politeness instead of destruction. Admiral Hale, Ylira replied, keeping her tone steady. You understand that the Calorian Alliance could not ignore an armada of this scale bearing down on our frontier. We opened defensive protocols in case of assault. Hale's voice crackled back, tinged with a mixture of regret and firmness. Understood. We do not seek conflict, only safe passage and parley. Sol Prime is our ancestral cradle. The legends spoke true. We are reclaiming what was lost. Very well, Ylira said. Reduce your fleet's readiness posture by 50%. We will match for courtesy. Our flagship, the Auriga, will meet you at approach Vector Theta 2. Over. The next hour, warp signatures dimmed as human dreadnoughts throttled back their engines. The Calorian fleet mirrored the gesture, weapons cooling, shields retracting to decorative banks of flowing energy. At the appointed vector, the Auriga drifted toward the human armada's core. A single human emissary vessel, sleek and silver, half the size of a Calorian cruiser, glided forward. Its bridge lights were visible even at dizzying distances. Ylira guided her ship alongside. A shimmering view screen materialized on the Auriga's forward bulkhead, revealing Admiral Hale in full regalia. His bronze-trimmed white uniform contrasted starkly with the black void behind him. Flanking him were officers whose uniforms varied only in insignia, captains of legions she had only ever read about in Silurian archives. Captain Ylira, Hale greeted, voice calm. I see your officers are as composed as you promised. Ylira inclined, her head. Calorian courtesy, Admiral, I must admit, though, I never imagined your fleet would be so fast. Hale's lips curved in a rueful smile. Our history is one of diaspora. After the great cataclysm hundreds of years ago, humanity scattered. Some found refuge in Sol Prime's hidden orbital docks. Others headed for the stars, forging new colonies. We lost records. Most of our worlds vanished into shadow. Only a handful of dreadnoughts remained intact, kept in stasis. We rebuilt around them. Behind Hale, the camera panned to reveal the dreadnought's scale. Their prow spines extended like the keels of giant beasts, their warp pylons arcing in intricate loops. We never intended to announce ourselves until we had secured Sol Prime's orbit, Hale continued. But your probes compromised our stealth platforms. We decided direct contact was inevitable. Your methods were effective, Ylira admitted. Few Silurian vessels breached stealth, yet you emitted classical Terran music and voice patterns to lure us, bold if risky. Hale's gaze hardened. Boldness has kept humanity alive when despair threatened to consume us. We cherish ingenuity over brute force, but we still possess sufficient firepower to deter any aggression. A subtle tremor rumbled through the Auriga's deck plating. Chief Tactical Officer Laurel reported, Captain, energy readings from the Dreadnought's gravitic rift projectors are off the charts. One salvo could disable our entire wing. Ylira's jaw clenched. Noted, but our priority remains peaceful, engagement unless provoked. She looked back at Hale. Very well, Admiral, we accept your parley. I propose we designate a neutral zone, an uninhabited moon of Sol Prime to meet face to face. Hale nodded. Agreed. Moon Selene 3. 1 hour from now. Bring only your core team. My envoy will meet you there. As the Auriga disengaged from the human emissary craft and set a slow course for Selene 3, Ylira felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The armada of legends was real, more powerful than any myth. Yet here they were, two civilizations once separated by time and distance, now on the cusp of rewriting galactic history together. Below decks, the crew readied themselves for what could be the most perilous diplomatic mission of their lives. In the cold, silent reaches of space, legends had become flesh, and their next moves would shape the fate of both peoples. The airlock seals hissed shut aboard the joint negotiation shuttle as it drifted between Solarian and human lines over Sol Prime. Captain Ylira sat stiffly in her chair, flanked by two Solarian officers. Across from her, Admiral Marcus Hale studied the same holomap, his expression unreadable. In the quiet tension, neither side spoke. Minutes passed like hours. Then the first war siren sounded. On the Calorian flagship Auriga, tactical alerts blared as human fighter wings cut across the system's equatorial plane, targeting Calorian point defenses around the planet. Simultaneously, Solarian corvette squadrons streaked toward the ragged formations of human frigates, plasma bolts whitening the void. Ylira's comm crackled to life. "Captain, we're under fire." Varith's voice was tight. "Human fighters engaging our scramble group, calling them hostile targets." Hale's shuttle shuddered violently. He steadied himself against the bulkhead. "This is Admiral Hale. Hold your fire. Identify friendlies." He keyed the comm override, but static drowned half his words. Below them, gravitic rifts spat arcs of violet energy at Calorian destroyers, fracturing shields like glass under hammer blows. Vice Admiral Corrin's voice roared through the comm. "They're using gravitic disruptors, shields at 20% and falling." Ylira gripped the armrests. "Shields, backup power to forward emitters. Return fire only in self-defense. Repeat, self-defense only." Her words were calm, but behind her eyes burned the knowledge that this scrape could escalate into all-out war. Outside, Calorian, beams lanced into human fighters, though more often they overcorrected and shot into the planet's thin ring of satellites. The humans responded with surgical precision, dodging flak, then bombarding Solarian shields with focused micro-torpedoes. Tremor shook the shuttle and its windows dimmed as the Auriga's shields flickered under bombardment. Luna Station's thrusters flared. Dozens of support craft scrambled to evacuate civilians from orbital cities. On the planet below, the gleam of reflective domes on Sol Prime's surface hinted at panic sweeping across the colonies. Ylira's jaw tightened. "Status, Lieutenant?" "Defensive Grid 3 is down. Tactical sensors offline in the southern quadrant. But I'm also detecting humans pulling back from boarding approach vectors. They're recovering pilots in pods." She stared at the holomap, several ember-red blobs drifting toward disabled Calorian wings, while human corvettes extended tractor nets to reel survivors in. "They're rescuing them." Hale's voice rang out over the intercom again, clearer this time. "Captain Ylira, this is Admiral Hale. I ordered a limited engagement to disable your point defenses only, not your people. We will not let them die in the void." Ylira exhaled, a mix of relief and indignation. "I appreciate the gesture, Admiral, but this tactic nearly destroyed my flagship." "War is rarely gentle," he replied. "If you can cease fire, so can we." She met his gaze across the shuttle's narrow cabin. Both leaders hung on those words, suspended between vengeance and mercy. Finally, Ylira nodded. "Calorian Alliance stands down." She tapped her comm. "All ships cease fire. Adopt passive posture." Moments later, the void fell eerily silent. Smoke trails from disrupted gravitic fields and burnt-out fighters drifted like cosmic ash. Vice Admiral Corrin's voice crackled hesitantly. "Admiral Hale, Captain Ylira, is there to be a treaty?" Hale took a slow breath. "There will be a ceasefire. I propose we hold talks aboard the neutral platform at L4. Ylira's heart pounded. The shattered peace was fragile, but it existed. Slender thread between two formidable fleets. On platform Athena L4, a converted mining outpost repurposed as a diplomatic haven, the wounded were tended side by side. Human med drones hovered above Calorian field surgeons, scanning for injuries and dispensing nanogel. Calorian engineers alongside human mechanics patched hull breaches in civilian transports. Captain Yalira walked the corridors, her uniform dusted with debris. She paused by a makeshift triage ward where a young Calorian pilot, missing an arm, gripped the hand of a human medic. The pilot's eyes shone with gratitude, even as his voice trembled. "Thank you for saving me." The medic smiled gently. "Don't thank me. Thank your admiral for ordering rescue." Yalira pressed on toward the grand conference chamber. Admiral Hale awaited her at the threshold, his uniform smudged with ash, his hair mussed, but his posture dignified. A table lay between them, strewn with data cylinders and holotablets. "Captain," Hale said, inclining his head, "I regret the bloodshed." "As do I," she replied quietly. "But we both had to protect our people." Hale gestured to the table. "We've compiled battlefield data, your corridors of retreat, our rules of engagement. We can use this to draft a ceasefire agreement." Yalira activated her holotablet, summoning side-by-side schematics of orbital defenses. "Here, no weapon emplacements within 20,000 kilometers of Sol Prime. No fighter patrols above equatorial latitudes without prior notice." Hale nodded, his holographic stylus dancing over the maps. "And we'll withdraw our gravitic platforms to L2 and L5. No warp jumps within 30 light minutes of each other. If either side breaches this zone, a joint council will convene immediately." They worked in tense solidarity, negotiating clause after clause until the outlines of a treaty shimmered into being. In that moment, the devastation of battle receded, replaced by the cautious hope that diplomacy could bind wounds where weapons had torn them open. When the final clause was agreed upon, peace maintained through shared vigilance and mutual respect, Yalira and Hale stood across the table and pressed palms in the Calorian salute. Outside, through the platform's viewport, the two armadas drifted apart in mirrored arcs, shields down, weapons cold. The shattered piece held, fragile as stained glass, yet stronger for having been tempered in fire. As Captain Yalira returned to the Auriga, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The war had been short but brutal, and the cost had been counted in lives nearly lost. Yet in saving enemy survivors, both sides had glimpsed the face of shared mortality and learned that honor could outshine vengeance. And in that dawning realization, the void felt a little less empty. Sunlight glinted off the domed spires of the Unity Station, anchored at Sol Cirrus Lagrange Point L4. Once a mining outpost, it now pulsed with life. Docking bays full of Calorian dreadnoughts and human frigates, research modules bristling, with sensors and cultural pavilions where both species shared music, art, and cuisine. Captain Yalira stepped onto the station's grand promenade, flanked by Admiral Marcus Hale. Between them, a polished obsidian dais held the twin scrolls of the Treaty of Saris Sol. Calorian delegates in sapphire uniforms formed one flank. Human envoys in white and bronze stood on the other. Hale cleared his throat, voice carrying across the assembly. "Today we turn legend into partnership, myth into mutual promise. We honor the past we share and the future we forge together." Yalira bowed respectfully. By this treaty, the Calorian Alliance and the United Earth Federation pledge to uphold peace, advance knowledge, and protect the legacy of Sol Prime for our peoples and for all who follow our stars. With stylus and seal, they inscribed the scrolls. Holographic runes glowed as ancient Calorian script intertwined with Terran characters. A burst of applause rippled through the crowd, carried on the swell of a joint Calorian-Terran orchestra performing Lynn Hale's piano arrangement of a Solorian anthem. Building bridges over the following weeks, Unity Station became a hub of collaboration. In the Tech Exchange Pavilion, Solorian warp engineers worked alongside human physicists to refine the hybrid drive system, combining Solorian field modulation with human gravitic resonators. Prototype vessels now promised greater speed and efficiency. In the agricultural dome, Hydroponic gardens, once tailored to Calorian flora, welcomed earth crops and heirloom Terran grains. The scent of basil and mint mingled with alien pollen, and Calorian botanists marveled at how human wheat thrived under plasma UV lamps. Meanwhile, in the cultural conclave, young Calorian artists practiced Terran holography, projecting scenes of Earth's oceans and forests. Human scholars pored over Calorian star maps, plotting ancient exploratory routes forgotten in humanity's archives. Stories shared one evening. Ylira attended a gathering in the Hall of Echoes, a circular chamber, where every voice hung in the air like a tangible current. There Lynn Hale recited a poem in Old Terran English. We rose from dust and flame, and spanned the void untamed, yet found our hearts at home again where legends once were named. A Calorian bard replied with a lilting chant in his native tongue, recounting the myth of children of Terra as guardians of cosmic balance. Their voices intertwined, creating a new legend, one of unity rather than separation. Ylira felt tears blur her vision. Never had she imagined that a tale born of fear and awe would give way to song and friendship. The first joint mission. When the inaugural joint expedition fleet assembled, it comprised Calorian cruisers and human frigates, led by Auriga and the EIO human vanguard Irene. Their mission: to chart the unscanned sectors beyond the former Calorian frontier, seeking habitable worlds, lost human colonies, and new resources for both peoples. Before departure, Ylira and Hale addressed the crews. On the Unity Station's launch deck, Hale raised his hand in salute. To curiosity, courage, and camaraderie. Ylira mirrored the gesture. May we learn from each other, and may our shared voyage light the path for all who follow. As the ship bay doors opened, a mixed squadron of fighters and drones arched into space, weaving between Calorian and human flagships. Below, families watched through panoramic viewports, children waving flags bearing both emblems, hopeful faces lit by the glow of departing engines. A new chapter, back on the bridge of the Auriga, Ylira gazed at the starfield ahead. The void was no longer silent nor empty. It was alive with possibility. Galaxies awaited their discovery, and with humanity and the Calorian Alliance united, the limits of exploration had shifted farther than ever before. She keyed her comm. All hands, prepare for jump. Course plotted for the Hesperian expanse. Jump in 3, 2, 1. With a shimmer of field coils and a pulse of gravity, the fleet leapt into the uncharted dark. As starlines blurred into streaks of light, Ylira allowed herself a hopeful smile. In the collision of legend and reality, a new era had dawned, and together they would write its story among the stars.